The day I was trapped in the fire, my husband was waiting outside the delivery room for his first love. I died in that inferno, nothing left but ashes. When I woke up again, I was back in high school. Looking at that familiar face, all I felt was nausea. Ethan would never know that he lost more than just me in that fire. He also lost his unborn child. It was Ethan's turn to clean the blackboard today, but the name written there was clearly mine, Mia Sanders. Everyone was used to me covering for Ethan. After all, I used to be a total doormat for him. Showtime, Mia. Chad tossed the eraser at my desk, gesturing for me to wipe the board for Ethan. I stared at the eraser, scoffed, and walked towards the blackboard. The girls who always looked down on my fawning over Ethan started their usual snide remarks. Seriously, so shameless. She's been doing this for ages, and he barely even looks at her. I know, right? I heard she's been chasing after him since middle school. I'd never stoop so low. It's pathetic. Right, the whispers were never ending. But the me of the past had chosen to ignore them, blinded by a one-sided love that ultimately led to my lonely death in the fire. Even reborn, I wouldn't forget the searing pain of that night. They say you have to hit rock bottom to turn things around. Well, I hit rock bottom. Time to turn around. Everyone probably expected me to do what I always did. Erase the board for Ethan, fetch him hot water, basically wait on him hand and foot. It was precisely because I was so used to giving that Ethan, 10 years later, mistook himself for a king. But not today. I looked at the girls who were mocking me with feigned gratitude. Thanks for the heads up, ladies. Freak. Ignoring their taunts, I erased my name from the blackboard and wrote Ethan's in bold letters. No need to change the name anymore, class president. Sorry to bother you all this time. The class stared at me, dumbfounded, as if I'd done something truly shocking. Is she crazy? What's her deal now? You guys don't get it. It's a reverse psychology. She's playing hard to get, waiting for him to come crawling back. Whatever. I shrugged and looked at the math equations covering the board. As I put down the eraser, I saw Ethan walking back from the basketball court. He was undeniably good-looking. Standing there at the doorway, backlit, it was easy to understand why I'd fallen for him. But now, looking at his face, I only felt disgust. The chattering girls suddenly fell silent. The entire classroom held its breath. Dozens of eyes were waiting for the show. I brushed the chalk dust off my hands, walked calmly to my seat, pulled out my chair, and sat down. I didn't glance at Ethan once. He hadn't noticed the blackboard, probably assuming I'd already taken care of it. He went straight to his seat, reaching for his water bottle. Unfortunately for him, I hadn't filled it today either. His best friend Zach noticed the blackboard and whispered, "Dude, what's up with Ms. Benson writing your name up there? Mia didn't wipe the board for you. And no water?" Ethan finally noticed the math equations scrawled across the blackboard. His brow furrowed, but he quickly regained his usual nonchalant expression and reached into his desk drawer. Normally, there would be a clean handkerchief and a carton of warm milk waiting for him. But today, there was nothing. Zach watched as Ethan came up empty-handed and with his usual lack of tact said to me, "Mia, what's with the sudden change of heart? Not wiping the board, no milk, no water, what gives?" I frowned at Zach, impatience creeping into my voice. Is he disabled? Can't he do these things himself? I'm not his mother. I have no obligation to take care of him. Ethan's eyes flickered and he let out a soft, cold snort. He probably thought, like everyone else, that I was just playing games, waiting for him to coax me back. Ethan nudged Zach with his foot, telling him to shut up. Zach obediently went up to erase the board. I opened my textbook and started studying. Because of Ethan, I'd given up a chance to attend the prestigious Northwood High and came to Southwood instead. I could have been in the advanced placement classes here, but because of Ethan, I ended up in the lowest level class. I'd fought with my mom about it, but she eventually gave in. Our families were close, so it didn't matter where I went to school. The plan was always for me to go to college with Ethan anyway. Perhaps it was because of our family's connection that I'd always seen Ethan as my Prince Charming. Now all I could think was, what a jerk. He acted like he was some kind of royalty. This time around, I was going to stay far away from Ethan, starting with the next seating chart change. I was determined to get into the top 10 in the class on the next monthly exams. I never wanted to sit in front of Ethan again. Zach came back down after erasing the board. Seeing me studying, he snatched my book. Whoa, Miss Sanders hitting the books? Getting ready to tutor our dear Ethan again? Maybe you can help me out too? In their eyes, everything I did was ultimately to get Ethan's attention. I grabbed my book back, my voice edged with annoyance. A dumb brain is a dumb brain, no matter how much tutoring it gets. Maybe you should just go study abroad or something. I turned with my book and met Ethan's eyes. He was angry. Of course. In his mind, Mia would never say anything bad about him. Did I do something to you? His tone was sharp, almost hostile. I ignored him, walked past him with my book, and returned to my seat. Knowing Ethan, he wouldn't ask me twice. Sure enough, he kicked the chair next to him and stormed out of the classroom. I shook my head. He really thought he was a king, and it was my fault for having such terrible taste in guys. I went to the cafeteria for lunch alone. Before, I'd always trailed after Ethan, eagerly fetching his lunch and drinks. Today, I realized how easy it was to just get food for myself. No more getting glared at by the people waiting in line. So many times I'd been yelled at because I was trying to get Ethan's favorite sweet and sour pork, and all I ever got in return was, "I didn't ask you to get me lunch. Serves you right." Yeah, serves me right. I carried my tray to my usual window seat. Soon, I saw Ethan and Zach walking towards the cafeteria with their basketball. They habitually walked over to me. But today, I hadn't gotten their lunch. Zach stared at the single tray in front of me, surprised. "Mia, where's our food?" I chewed my food, gesturing towards the serving counter. "There might still be some left if you hurry." Ethan frowned at me. I'd bruised his ego and he clearly wasn't happy. "Mia, are you on something? What did I ever do to you?" I kept eating, my head down. Should I tell him that 10 years later, while he waited for his first love to give birth to a child that wasn't even his, our own unborn child, and I died in a fire? Should I tell him that I'd called him countless times that night, only to get a busy signal? Or that he eventually just hung up on me and texted that he was in a meeting in a hospital corridor? Ethan, did you really think I was that stupid? Did you really think I didn't know anything? In the end, Ethan didn't eat. He stormed out of the cafeteria, fuming. He skipped afternoon classes too. That evening, I told my parents that I wasn't going to college with Ethan after graduation. My mom asked why. Looking at my parents' faces, I felt a sudden lump in my throat. I was their only child, and in my past life, I'd been so obsessed with a man who held no love for me in his heart or eyes that I'd neglected the two people who loved me most in the world. And in the end, I made them bury their own daughter. I sniffed and said, I want to spend more time with you guys. My dad always spoiled me. If I made up my mind about something, he would support me. After that, my parents found me a tutor. He was a year older than me, from Northwood High. He'd gotten the highest score in the city on the entrance exam. His name was Ashton Hughes. Ashton came to my house every weekend to tutor me. He was incredibly smart. His explanations were often simpler than what the teachers taught in class. This weekend was the high school basketball league championship. Our school was hosting. Ashton was playing too. He was the captain of Northwood's team. He told me he'd compiled some notes for me and would bring them over on game day. Since the game was on a Friday, Ashton was coming to my house for our regular tutoring session after the game. But Ethan was playing too, so I wasn't planning on going to the game. I was waiting in the classroom for Ashton to text me. I sent him a message. Good luck, Mr. Hughes. Stay safe. I was just putting my phone away when Zach snatched it. Good luck, Mr. Hughes. Stay safe. Mia, have you moved on? Zach's loud voice attracted Ethan's attention. He looked over at me, a strange expression on his face. I thought I saw a flicker of nervousness, even fear, in his eyes. Ethan, the always arrogant Ethan, showing such vulnerability. He walked towards me, took the phone from Zach, and stared at the messages, his face grim. Finally, he looked up at me slowly, his voice laced with suspicion. Who is he? I snatched my phone back and shoved it into my pocket. What's it to you? Zach gaped at me. It was hard to believe these words were coming from Mia. I turned to leave, heading for the library. As I turned, Ethan grabbed my arm. I asked you who he is. You're not going anywhere until you tell me. Was he crazy? In my past life, I'd chased after him, and he treated me like a nuisance, his disgust clear on his face. This time around I was giving him what he wanted, distance, and he was suddenly clinging to me. How pathetic. I shook off his hand and frowned at him, my voice calm. Ethan, I thought you hated me? So please, just keep hating me. Ethan grabbed my arm again. Just then, a clear male voice called out from the doorway. Mia. Ethan and I both looked up. Ashton stood there in his basketball uniform, holding his Northwood jacket and a notebook. He and Ethan were complete opposites. Ethan exuded youthful arrogance, while Ashton had a gentle, warm presence, like a friendly older brother. I pulled away from Ethan and walked towards Ashton. How did you find me? Southwood's building layout was a maze. Even I got lost when I first started here. It was Ashton's first time here, and he'd found me. Finding you is a simple thing. Ashton handed me the notebook. It took me a long time to truly understand that sentence. Finding me was a simple thing for him. Ethan looked uneasy as he watched us talking and laughing. He started to step towards me, but Zach stopped him. Ethan, the game's about to start. Let's go. Ethan shot Ashton a cold look, then kicked the classroom door as he walked out the back. I hadn't realized how immature he was. Ashton looked at Ethan's outburst with confusion, then smiled faintly. Is that Ethan? I nodded, embarrassedly scratching the back of my head. Have you ever felt ashamed of yourself for having liked someone? That's how I felt. I could have dug a hole and buried myself. Good luck with the game. I'll be reading, waiting for you. You're not coming to watch? Ashton had probably heard about my relentless pursuit of Ethan. There's something unpleasant at the court. I hugged the notebook and shook my head. I used to be the most enthusiastic spectator at Ethan's games. Banners, cheering. I'd given him everything I could, but he never took me to the post-game celebrations. Even his teammates would say, invite Mia. She put in so much effort. But Ethan would always reply, she's just being clingy. It'd be awkward. I'd overheard that conversation once. I cried for a long time that day. I should have known then that no matter how hard I tried, Ethan would never see me. He had room for everything in his eyes, except for Mia. I was like Ethan's shadow, always trailing behind him, even getting stepped on. Sometimes I thought I was pretty pathetic, but then I'd remember that Ethan never actually rejected my affections. He was the one who kept giving me hope. Ashton seemed to understand. He just smiled. As he left, he said, wait for me. We'll go home together after I win. I laughed. You're that confident you'll win? Ashton draped his jacket over his shoulder and standing at the end.
Near the end of the third quarter, Ethan finally started playing recklessly. Northwood had pulled ahead again, and his frustration was obvious. He drove straight toward the basket, weaving past two defenders. Ashton stepped in. The collision sent a collective gasp through the arena. A second later, Ethan hit the floor hard. The referee's whistle shrieked. Foul. Southwood's bench exploded. Ethan, get up. You okay? My eyes followed him automatically. Old habits were stubborn things. A year ago, I would have been halfway down the bleachers already. I would have panicked before finding out whether he was actually hurt. Probably would have shoved past his teammates, handed him water, and asked if he needed to go to the hospital. Then he would have told me to stop making a scene. Thinking about it now is honestly embarrassing. I sank deeper into my seat. Ethan had a coach. He had teammates. He had dozens of friends. Most importantly, he had functioning legs. He could handle himself. Slowly, Ethan pushed himself up from the floor. His teammates crowded around him immediately. The coach was shouting something from the sidelines. A group of girls near the front row looked seconds away from crying. The whole gym's attention was on him. Yet Ethan ignored everyone. Instead, he looked into the stands. Searching. I knew exactly who he was looking for. When his gaze landed on me, his shoulders relaxed slightly, as if he'd finally found what he wanted. Then he waited. I almost laughed. Was he expecting me to rush over? Bring him a sports drink? Write him a sympathy card? Maybe compose a poem about his tragic sacrifice on the basketball court? The Ethan in my memories would have rolled his eyes at that kind of attention. Now he looked disappointed he wasn't getting it. Life really was strange. I opened Ashton's notebook and flipped to the page on quadratic equations. The handwriting was neat and organized. There were even little notes in the margins explaining common mistakes. My lips curved unconsciously. Who spends this much time making study notes for someone else? The answer was apparently Ashton Hughes. A few rows away, people were still fussing over Ethan. I heard Southwood's cheerleaders discussing whether he needed ice. Another girl was offering him water. He wasn't exactly lacking support. When I glanced up again, Ethan was still staring in my direction. His expression had changed. The confidence I'd seen earlier was gone. So was the smug look he'd worn when he first spotted me entering the arena. For the first time, he looked genuinely unsettled. Good. Let him wonder. Let him spend a few days asking himself why things felt different. I spent 10 years wondering why I was never enough for him. A little confusion wouldn't kill him. The whistle blew. Play resumed. Ashton jogged back onto the court, calm as ever. The moment the ball touched his hands, the pace of the game shifted again. Everything became smoother, cleaner, like he'd already mapped out the next 10 moves in his head. Watching him play was strangely reassuring. You never had to worry about whether he'd show up. He already had. That alone put him miles ahead of Ethan. By the start of the fourth quarter, Northwood's lead had grown even larger. Southwood students were getting nervous. Northwood's section was celebrating early. Meanwhile, I found myself smiling for an entirely different reason. For once, I wasn't spending a basketball game worrying about Ethan. I wasn't carrying his water bottle. I wasn't saving him a seat. I wasn't memorizing his favorite snacks for after the game. I was just watching basketball. Turns out, it was actually pretty enjoyable. Ethan stayed where he was. For once, he looked like he didn't know what to do with himself. That alone almost made me late leaving. Almost. Ashton adjusted the strap of his bag and tilted his head slightly toward me. You good? I glanced at Ethan one last time. He was still watching. Still waiting for something to happen that clearly wasn't going to. Yeah, I said. Let's go. We walked out together. The hallway outside the gym was quieter, the noise from the celebration fading behind us. Ashton stretched his shoulders like he'd just finished something mildly annoying rather than a championship game. You always leave this fast after events? Only the ones I don't feel like dealing with. That sounded very specific. It was. He laughed under his breath. We made it halfway down the corridor before I heard footsteps behind us. Faster this time. Closer. Mia. Ethan again. Of course. I stopped, slowly turning around. He'd followed us out. Zach lingered a few steps behind him, clearly wishing he could teleport away. Ethan's eyes flicked between me and Ashton, sharp and restless. You left with him, he said. As you can see, I replied. That's all you have to say? I raised a brow. What were you expecting? A speech. His jaw tightened. Ashton shifted slightly beside me, quiet but present. He wasn't interrupting, just watching the exchange like it was mildly interesting. Ethan noticed that too. His gaze hardened. You're doing this on purpose. That made me pause. Then I actually smiled. Doing what? He hesitated, like he didn't have a clean answer that wouldn't make him sound ridiculous. I nodded slowly, like I understood anyway. Right. So I'll help again. I pointed lightly between us. You're upset I didn't watch you play. You're upset I didn't bring you anything. You're upset I didn't wait around like usual. A beat. You're also upset I'm standing next to someone else. Zach made a choking sound behind him. Ethan didn't move. His silence said enough. I tilted my head. That's a lot of emotions for someone who told me I was just being clingy last year. That landed. Hard. His expression flickered. Something like frustration or embarrassment. Maybe both. Ashton glanced at me amused. Do you want to go before this turns into a longer conversation? Yes. I started walking again. This time Ethan stepped in front of us, blocking the path. That got annoying fast. I exhaled. Ethan. Move. His eyes locked onto mine. You've changed. Congratulations. Took you long enough to notice. That's not what I mean. I know exactly what you mean. He flinched slightly at that. For the first time, his confidence didn't show up on time. I adjusted my grip on Ashton's notebook. You're right, I said casually. I changed. A pause. Turns out life's easier when you stop waiting for someone who treats you like an option. The words hung there. No drama. No shaking voice. Just a simple fact. Ethan didn't respond immediately. And in that silence, Ashton stepped forward just slightly. Not aggressively. Just enough. Are we good to go now? He asked me. I nodded. Yeah. We walked past Ethan this time. He didn't stop us. Didn't follow. Didn't speak. Just stood there while we left. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I felt like I was walking towards something instead. The air outside the gym was cooler. Quieter too. The noise from the celebration faded into a distant roar behind us, like it belonged to another world entirely. Ashton walked beside me with his hands in his pockets, relaxed again now that the game was over. So, he said, you always argue like that with people you're not interested in? I glanced at him. Was that an argument? It had structure. Rising tension. Emotional payoff. I'd call it an argument. I snorted. Then yes. I'm very experienced. That explains a lot. We reached the steps leading down from the building. A group of Northwood students passed by, still cheering, still hyped, still replaying the game in loud, chaotic detail. Someone recognized Ashton and immediately started shouting his name. He gave them a polite wave, then turned back to me like it never happened. That small difference stuck in my head. Ethan would have leaned into it. Ashton treated it like background noise. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. Unknown number. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Ethan. Where are you? I stared at the screen for a second, then turned it off without replying. Ashton noticed. Trouble? Annoyance, I corrected. Same category. Not even close. He looked amused again. We kept walking. A few minutes later, Ashton spoke. You didn't react when he followed you. I shrugged. Used to think that kind of thing meant something. And now? Now it just means someone's uncomfortable with losing control. Ashton hummed, like that made sense. That's a pretty specific observation. I had a lot of time to study it. We turned onto the quieter street outside the campus gates. Streetlights had started flickering on. The sky was turning that soft orange color that makes everything feel slower. Ashton slowed slightly. I'm guessing he was your. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I let out a breath. Someone I used to mistake for important. Ashton nodded once, like he accepted that without judgment. That sounds exhausting. It was. A pause. Then, lighter. You picked a much better tutor then. I glanced at him. You're not supposed to know you're the upgrade. I'm very aware. That earned a laugh from me, real this time. We stopped at a crosswalk. The light turned red. Cars passed in a steady stream. Ashton tilted his head toward me. You said earlier you changed. Yeah, what else changed? I thought about it. About the version of me who used to stand in crowded gyms, waiting for someone to look back. About the version of me who thought love meant endurance. I shrugged. I got tired. That's it. That's enough. The light turned green. We crossed. Halfway over, Ashton spoke again, quieter this time. Good. I glanced at him. He wasn't looking at me now, just ahead. But his voice stayed steady. People usually only change when they're finally honest about what hurts. That sentence landed differently than I expected. Not heavy. Just real. We reached the other side. Ashton stopped near the corner where our paths would split. I'll send you the next set of notes tonight, he said. Don't overwork yourself, I replied automatically. He raised a brow. That's new. What? You worrying about people? I clicked my tongue. Don't get used to it. He smiled like he fully intended to anyway. See you. Yeah. He started walking away. Then paused halfway down the street and called back without turning around. Oh, and Mia? What? His voice carried easily in the evening air. If he keeps following you, tell me. I blinked. Why? A short pause. Then, casually. Because I'm competitive. I stared at him. He finally looked back over his shoulder, grinning slightly. Good night. And kept walking. I stood there for a moment longer than I needed to, then exhaled. What kind of tutor is this guy? I stood there watching Ashton disappear down the street longer than I probably needed to. Competitive, he said. Like this was some kind of game. I let out a short breath and turned away. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Same unknown number. Ethan. Answer me. I stared at it while walking. Then typed back with my thumb without slowing down. No. Sent. 2 seconds later. Where are you going with him? I stopped at the curb. Honestly, I almost admired the consistency. Even now, he still thought he had the right to ask questions like that. I typed again. Home. A pause. Then another message came in fast. Come back. That one made me actually laugh. Out loud. A couple walking past gave me a weird look. I didn't care. I turned my phone off entirely this time and shoved it into my pocket. Problem? I muttered to myself. Yeah, not mine anymore. The walk home felt different. Lighter. Not because anything had changed outside. The streets were the same. The noise was the same. Even the sky had that same fading orange glow. But my head was quieter. For once, it wasn't filled with Ethan's voice. What he said. What I should have done. What he might think. Instead, I was thinking about Ashton's notebook. Neat handwriting. Color-coded sections. Margins filled with explanations like he actually believed I could understand it all. Who even does that? I reached my neighborhood faster than expected. The familiar gate came into view, and with it, the faint sound of my parents talking inside. Warm. Normal. Real. I paused for a second before opening it. In my last life, I barely remembered coming home. I was always out. Always chasing. Always tired. Always late. Now I just stood there. Like I had nowhere to rush to. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. Mia, my mom's voice called immediately. In here, I answered. Footsteps came quickly. She appeared at the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel, looking me over like she always did. You're back early. I didn't have anything to do there. That made her pause. Then her face softened a little. That sounds nice. Nice. The word felt strange. I stepped inside. My dad was sitting in the living room reading something, glasses halfway down his nose. He looked up. You ate. Yeah, you win. I blinked. What? The game, he said, like it was obvious. Your school thing. I almost smiled. I didn't play. Then why were you there? I opened my mouth, closed it, then shrugged. I want to return something. My mom raised a brow. What thing? I lifted the notebook slightly. This. She leaned in, curious. That looks heavy. It is. My dad went back to his paper like the conversation had been successfully completed. My mom, however, didn't stop watching me. You're in a good mood, she said after a moment. I hesitated. Was I? I hadn't noticed. Maybe I was just, not in a bad one. That felt more accurate. Yeah, I said finally. I think so. She smiled like she understood something I didn't need explained. Good. My phone stayed silent for the rest of the night. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't check it before going to bed. Outside my window, the street was quiet. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed. Ethan didn't stop staring even after I turned away. I could feel it heavy, fixed, irritating in a way I refused to acknowledge. Finally, I sighed and tapped my pen against the desk. Ethan. He didn't answer immediately. Of course he didn't. Like silence gave him authority. I glanced over my shoulder. He was already looking at me. What? He asked, voice low. You're doing it again. Doing what? Watching me like I'm supposed to react to it. A few students nearby went very still, pretending not to listen. Ethan's expression tightened. That guy, he said after a pause. What is he to you? There it was again. Ashton had officially entered his vocabulary as a problem. I tilted my head slightly. He helps me study. That's it. That's usually what tutors do. His jaw flexed. That's not what it looked like yesterday. I almost laughed. Oh? And what did it look like? Ethan hesitated. That hesitation alone was new. He used to speak like everything was obvious, like the world revolved around his interpretation of it. Now he looked like he was trying to piece together something that didn't fit anymore. I leaned back in my chair. You didn't like what you saw, I said lightly. That's really all this is, isn't it? He didn't answer right away. Which answered enough. Zach slowly turned around in his seat again, whispering under his breath like he was narrating a disaster. This is getting intense. The teacher cleared their throat at the front of the room. Back to the lesson. I turned forward again, already done with the conversation. But Ethan wasn't. I felt it again a minute later, his gaze still stuck on me, heavier now, less certain. Like he couldn't figure out when exactly he stopped being the center of my attention. The irony was almost funny. For years, I had tried to be noticed by him. Now that I wasn't trying anymore, he didn't know what to do with it. I opened my notebook and started writing down the notes on the board. Clean. Simple. Useful. Unlike everything else in my life before. Behind me, Ethan finally stopped looking. Not because he understood. Because he couldn't force an answer out of me anymore. And for the first time, that silence felt like mine. The rest of the school day passed without Ethan saying another word to me. Not because he stopped trying. Because every time he looked like he was about to, something in him seemed to hesitate at the last second. That alone was new. And honestly, I didn't have the energy to analyze it. I had more important things to deal with. Like the monthly exams coming up. If I wanted to change anything about my future, I couldn't rely on second chances and dramatic realizations. I needed scores. Real ones. After school, I went straight to the library. No detours. No waiting around. No familiar shadows following behind me. Just me, books, and a quiet table near the window. For once, it felt easy to breathe. About an hour in, a chair across from me shifted. I didn't look up immediately. I thought I'd find you here. Ashton. I finally raised my eyes. He was holding a stack of printed papers this time, still in his uniform, hair slightly damp like he hadn't bothered to fully dry it after practice. You're early, I said. You're always here, he replied. So I adjusted. That sounded simple, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He placed the papers down. Practice exam set. I made it based on your weak areas. I flipped through a few pages, then frowned. You're making this feel like I have no dignity left. You don't, he said calmly. I stared at him. He smiled. I'm kidding. No, you weren't. A little. I sighed and leaned back. You're weird for a tutor. And you're improving for a student. I clicked my tongue. That's not a compliment. It was meant to be one. A pause. Then I asked, why are you doing all this? He didn't pretend not to understand. That was another thing I was starting to notice about him. He didn't dodge questions. He thought for a moment. Because you're capable, he said simply. You just didn't have a reason before. That hit quieter than I expected. I looked down at the papers again. That's a lot of confidence in me. It's based on data, he said. Your fundamentals aren't bad. Your focus was. I let out a short laugh. Wow. So I was just distracted by a terrible life decision. That's one way to put it. We worked for another hour. Maybe two. Time blurred in a way it never did when Ethan was involved. Just questions, answers, corrections. At some point, I realized something uncomfortable. I was actually getting better. When we finally packed up, the sun had already started setting. Ashton stretched slightly. You hungry? A little. There's a place near here. I hesitated only briefly before nodding. Fine. We left the library together. Outside, the school grounds were mostly empty. Then I saw him. Ethan. Standing near the gate. Like he'd been waiting. Again. Zach was nowhere in sight this time. Just him. When he saw us, his posture straightened immediately. And, just like that, the calm I'd built all afternoon tried to crack. Ashton slowed slightly beside me. Want me to wait? I glanced at him. No, I said. This won't take long. We walked forward. Ethan stepped in front of us before we reached the gate. His eyes flicked briefly to Ashton, then settled on me. You've been avoiding me. I sighed. I've been studying. That's not what I mean. I know. A beat of silence. Then he said, quieter than before, you're doing it again. Doing what? Leaving. That one landed differently. For a second, I didn't respond. Then I adjusted my bag strap. I didn't leave, I said. I stopped waiting. His expression shifted. Something in it tightened, like he didn't like the distinction. Ashton didn't interrupt, but I felt him watching quietly beside me. Ethan finally looked at him again. Longer this time. You're replacing me? The question came out sharper than intended. I blinked, then actually smiled a little. That's not how people work. A pause. Then I stepped slightly past him. Move. This time, he didn't stop me. He just stood there while Ashton and I walked through the gate. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel like I was escaping anything. Just continuing forward. The walk away from the gate was quieter than before. Ethan didn't follow. That alone felt noticeable. Ashton walked beside me with his hands in his pockets, glancing ahead like nothing dramatic had just happened behind us. He always like that, he asked. Like what? Like he thinks standing in front of people changes outcomes. I thought about it. Yes. Ashton nodded once, like that explained a lot. Interesting strategy. Poor success rate. That made me laugh before I could stop myself. We kept walking. A few minutes later, Ashton spoke again. You handled that better than yesterday. I didn't handle anything, I said. I just didn't entertain it. Same thing. It really isn't. He didn't argue. That was his thing, he didn't force conclusions. He just dropped them and let you decide if you agreed. It was irritatingly effective. We reached a small food street near the school perimeter. Nothing fancy, just stalls, lights, and the smell of fried food drifting through the air. Ashton slowed. Pick anything, he said. I looked around. You're paying. I brought you study material, he said. This feels like the logical next step in academic support. I raised a brow. That's not how tutoring works. It is now. I snorted and pointed at a stall. Fine. That one. We ordered, then sat at a small table near the edge of the walkway. For a while, it was normal. Almost peaceful. Then my phone buzzed again. I already knew before checking. Ethan. This time, just one message. Why him? I stared at it for a second. Ashton noticed. Still him. Yeah. Persistent. That's one word for it. I put the phone face down. Didn't reply. Didn't think about it too long either. Ashton leaned back slightly in his chair. You're not answering. Doesn't feel necessary anymore. He studied me for a moment. Then said, that's usually when people realize they're finally free of something. I looked at him. You say things like that too casually. He shrugged. I observe a lot. Of people. Of patterns. That answer was so him it almost made sense. Our food arrived. I picked up my chopsticks. Halfway through eating I noticed something odd. A group of students passing by slowed when they saw us. Whispered. Looked again. Then moved faster. I ignored it at first. Until one of them said something that reached my ears clearly. That's her. Isn't that Ethan's? The rest got swallowed by distance. I didn't turn around. Just took another bite. Ashton followed my gaze briefly. Your life always this entertaining? Only recently, I said. He smiled faintly. Sounds exhausting. It used to be. A pause. Then I added, it's getting better. That surprised even me a little. Ashton didn't comment on it. Just nodded like he believed it. When we finished eating, the sky had gone fully dark. Streetlights flickered on properly now, casting warm pools of light across the road. We stood up. Ashton adjusted his bag. I'll walk you home. I can manage. I know. Then why? He looked at me like it was obvious. Because I want to. That shut the conversation down in a way Ethan never managed. We started walking again. Halfway down the street, my phone buzzed once more. I didn't even look this time. Just turned it off. Ashton noticed, but didn't ask. A few seconds later, he said casually. If he keeps showing up like this, it's going to get messy. I glanced at him. You offering to fight him or something? He thought about it. Then smiled. Academically speaking, I think I'd win. I actually laughed. You're insane. Efficient, he corrected. We reached my gate sooner than expected. I stopped. Ashton did too. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he nodded toward the house. Tomorrow. Same time, I said. Good. He turned to leave. Then paused again, like he remembered something. Oh, what now? His eyes flicked to mine. Try not to let him pull you back into old habits. I held his gaze for a second. Then nodded once. I'm not planning to. Good. And this time, he actually left. I stood there a moment after the street went quiet. Then opened the gate and went inside. Behind me, my phone stayed off. And for once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything at all. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. My mom humming in the kitchen, my dad watching TV with the volume too low, the soft clatter of dishes being washed. The kind of quiet that didn't demand anything from me. I'm home, I said automatically. Dinner's almost ready, my mom called back. Later, I replied. I already ate. My dad glanced over the sofa. With friends. I paused half a second. Study group. That wasn't exactly a lie. Just incomplete truth. He nodded like that was enough information and went back to the TV. I headed upstairs. For the first time, I didn't immediately check my phone. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened Ashton's materials. The pages were still neatly organized, his handwriting calm and precise, like even chaos had been forced into order. I traced a line of notes with my finger, then picked up my pen, and actually started working. Time passed faster than I expected. By the time I finally leaned back, my wrist was sore and the sky outside my window had gone fully dark. I stretched. Okay, I muttered. That's new. A knock came at my door. Come in, I said. My mom poked her head in. You've been locked in here all evening. Studying. She looked at the desk, then at me, then smiled a little. I can tell. That made me pause. Is that good or bad? It's different, she said simply. Different is good. She stepped inside, placed a glass of water on my desk, and adjusted a stack of books that didn't actually need adjusting. Then she hesitated. You've been happier lately. I blinked. Happier? Less tense, she corrected. You used to look like you were always waiting for something to go wrong. I didn't answer right away, because she wasn't wrong. I used to live like everything depended on one person noticing me. Now, I glanced at the notebook again. Now things just happened. I shrugged slightly. I guess I stopped waiting for people who never showed up. My mom studied me for a moment, then nodded once, like she understood more than she said out loud. Good, she said again, and left me alone. The next morning, I expected silence. Instead, the moment I walked into school, I felt it. People were looking again. But enough. Whispers followed me down the hallway like static. I caught fragments. Ethan. Northwood guy. Did you see yesterday? I didn't slow down. Didn't react. Just kept walking. Then I saw him. Ethan. Standing outside the classroom. Just waiting in the hallway like he'd chosen that spot on purpose. When he saw me, he straightened immediately. Like he'd been readying himself. That alone was already exhausting. I stopped a few steps away. What now? His eyes flicked briefly to the classroom behind me. Then back to me. You turned off your phone. I know. You didn't answer anything. That's usually how phones work when they're off. A pause. His jaw tightened slightly. I saw you yesterday. I noticed. With him. There it was again. Ashton's existence apparently had become a personal offense. I sighed. Ethan, you don't get to question where I go anymore. His expression flickered. Like the sentence didn't land properly in his head. What does that mean? I looked at him directly. It means I don't owe you updates. Silence. The hallway noise continued around us, students passing, lockers opening, footsteps fading. But right here, everything felt paused. Ethan's voice dropped. Since when? I almost laughed. Since always. That finally cracked something. Something closer to disbelief. Like he was only now realizing the rules had changed without his permission. Before he could speak again, I stepped past him. But this time, he didn't block me. He just stood there. And as I walked into class, I realized something simple. He wasn't the center of my day anymore. He was just in it. And that difference changed everything. Ethan didn't follow me into the classroom this time. He stayed in the hallway. That alone made the room feel strangely normal when I sat down. Zach slid into his seat late, looking like he'd just survived something stressful. He leaned toward me immediately. Okay, he whispered. What did you do to him? I didn't even look up from my book. Existing, apparently. Zach stared at me like I'd grown a second head. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. He sank back into his chair, muttering something about dangerous character development. I ignored him and opened my notes. The lesson started. For once, I actually paid attention the whole time. Just because I wanted to. That alone felt strange. After a while, the classroom door opened. Ethan came in. Late. He didn't look at the teacher. Didn't look at Zach. His eyes went straight to me. Then stopped. Like he'd expected something else and didn't find it. He sat down without speaking. The rest of the class pretended not to notice the shift in the air. But everyone noticed. They always did. At lunch, I went straight to the cafeteria. I just got my food and sat down by the window. Alone. And it didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like space. Halfway through eating, a tray landed across from me. I looked up. Zach. He looked unsure of his own decision, like his legs had brought him here without permission. Hey, he said carefully. I chewed. Hey. He glanced around before speaking again. So, are you and Ethan like, done? I almost choked on my drink. Why are you asking me that? Because he hasn't shut up since yesterday, Zach said immediately. Then quickly added, not literally. He's actually being super quiet. Which is worse. That earned a small pause for me. He's quiet. Like, unnervingly quiet. I went back to my food. Good for him. Zach blinked. That's it. What else do you want me to say? I don't know, he gestured vaguely. Something dramatic? Some emotional reveal? You used to. He stopped himself. Too late. I raised a brow. Used to what? Zach coughed into his fist. Nothing. Forget it. Smart choice. Silence stretched for a moment. Then he leaned forward slightly. Look, I'm not trying to be weird, but he keeps staring at your empty seat when you're not around. I stopped chewing. Slowly set my chopsticks down. Then looked at him. My empty seat? Zach nodded. Yeah, like he expects you to show up there or something. I stared at him for a second. Then leaned back. Sounds like a personal problem. Zach laughed awkwardly. Yeah, okay, that's fair. He hesitated again. Then added, softer this time. He didn't used to be like this. I shrugged. People change. Yeah, but... No, but I cut in, not unkindly. It's not my job to fix whatever version of him you're remembering. That shut him up. Not harshly. Just clearly. Zach nodded slowly and picked at his food. Got it. He left a few minutes later. I finished lunch alone again. And for the first time, I noticed something else. Being alone wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was just normal. After school, I went straight to the library again. Ashton was already there. Of course he was. He looked up as I approached, sliding a sheet of paper toward me without a word. Pop quiz, he said. Exciting. You'll survive. I'm touched by your faith in me. He smiled slightly. We worked. Time passed. Easy. Steady. At some point, I realized I wasn't thinking about Ethan at all. Not even once. And that was when the chair across from me shifted. Not Ashton. I looked up. Ethan stood there. Quiet. Still. Watching. Like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to interrupt the life I was already in the middle of. Ashton didn't move immediately. Just looked between us once. Then leaned back slightly. Well, he said calmly, this is new. I closed my book slowly. And looked at Ethan. Waiting. Ethan stood by the library table, not saying anything at first. Ashton looked up briefly from his notes, then went back to them like Ethan wasn't worth rearranging his focus for. I closed my book and exhaled. Ethan, if you're here to restart yesterday's conversation, I'm not interested. His eyes stayed on me. I just wanted to talk. You had your chance. That made him pause. He didn't argue right away, which was new. Instead, he glanced at Ashton again. Then back to me. You've been with him a lot. I've been studying. That's not what I mean. I know, I said. But that's still the answer. A few students nearby had started pretending very hard not to listen. Ethan lowered his voice. You really changed. I gave a small shrug. People usually do after they stop repeating the same mistakes. That clearly hit a nerve, but he swallowed it. There was something different about him now. Less confidence, more uncertainty, like he couldn't figure out where he stood in a situation that used to feel simple. Ashton finally spoke, tone even. If this is private, I can step out. I shook my head immediately. No need. That seemed to settle it for him. He stayed. Ethan noticed that too. His gaze tightened slightly. You're comfortable with him, he said. I looked at him for a moment. I'm comfortable not being ignored, I replied. That tends to help. Silence. That one landed harder than the others. Ethan's expression shifted, like he wanted to deny it, but couldn't find a clean way to. I stood up and adjusted my bag. This isn't going anywhere useful, I said. I'm going home. Ashton followed without hesitation, gathering his things. We walked out together. Ethan didn't stop us. Didn't call after me. But I could feel his eyes on us until we were gone. Outside, Ashton spoke as we crossed the courtyard. You didn't hesitate. Should I have? No, he said. Just noticed. I glanced at him. Not everything needs to be analyzed like one of your practice tests. He smiled faintly. I analyze everything. It's cheaper than confusion. That sounds exhausting. It usually is. We walked on. And for once, I didn't turn around. Not because I was forcing myself not to, but because there was nothing behind me worth checking anymore. Ethan stood by the table for a moment too long. Then he finally spoke. Come outside. 5 minutes. I didn't move. I'm studying. This won't take long. Ashton closed his notebook this time, looking at me instead of Ethan. You want me to wait here? No, I said, standing up. I'm done here anyway. That wasn't for Ethan. That was just true. We stepped out of the library. The hallway outside was emptier now, most students already gone. Ethan stopped near the windows. I stopped a few steps away. What is it? I asked. He hesitated like he didn't like how controlled I sounded. You've really decided to cut me off completely? I tilted my head slightly. I didn't cut you off. I just stopped participating. That's the same thing. No, I said. One of them takes effort. The other is just me living my life. Silence. Ashton stood slightly behind me, not interfering, just present. Ethan noticed that too. His gaze shifted toward him again. You're serious about him. That made me sigh. This again. Ethan stepped closer. I'm asking you. And I'm telling you it's not your business. That finally made his expression crack. Not anger this time, something more unsettled. You used to look at me differently. I met his eyes. That version of me didn't know better. That hit harder than anything else I'd said. He went quiet. A long pause passed. Then he said, quieter, so that's it. I shrugged. That's it. Another beat. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out clean. Behind me, Ashton finally spoke. We should go. You've got tutoring notes to finish. I nodded. Ethan stepped forward half a step, then stopped himself. Like his body remembered a habit his mind couldn't justify anymore. I walked past him. This time he didn't try to block me. Didn't call my name. Didn't follow. Just stood there while I left the building. And this time, the story actually moved forward, because I wasn't going back to where it started. As we stepped outside, the air felt cooler than I expected. Ashton walked beside me, hands in his pockets, like what just happened in the hallway was something mildly inconvenient rather than important. He glanced at me once. You okay? I thought about it. Then nodded. Yeah, that was shorter than I expected. That's your standard for closure? He asked. It's an improvement. That got a faint laugh out of him. We didn't talk about Ethan again. Not immediately anyway. Instead, Ashton changed direction slightly. There's a test next week, he said. You're not ready. I love how confident you are in insulting me. It's not an insult. It's a timeline. I huffed a laugh and kept walking. The next few days settled into something strange. Ethan didn't approach me again. But I felt it. The watching. The hesitation. Like he was waiting for me to snap back into the version of myself he understood. It didn't happen. Instead, I studied. Properly. Ashton's notes helped more than I expected. He didn't just explain answers, he explained patterns. What teachers liked. What exams repeated. How to think instead of memorize. It was efficient. Annoyingly efficient. One afternoon after class, Zach slid into the seat beside me again. He looked like he'd been sent on a mission he didn't want. So, he said carefully, Ethan's weird. I kept writing. That's not new. No, like worse weird. I paused. Define worse. Zach leaned closer. He's training like crazy. He stopped going out after school. He barely talks. Coach says he's acting like the championship is personal now. I finally looked at him. And? Zach blinked. And? That's not normal. It's basketball season, I said. People train. This isn't training. This is, he gestured vaguely, obsession energy. I went back to my notes. Still not my problem. Zach sighed like I was refusing to participate in the emotional chaos he expected. Then he lowered his voice. He keeps asking about you. That made my pen pause. Just for a second. Then I continued writing. What does he want? Honestly? Zach said. I don't think he knows. That part, I believed. Later that week, I ran into Ethan properly again. After school, outside the gates. He was waiting. But this time, he didn't step in front of me immediately. He just watched me approach. Ashton wasn't with me today, which meant it was just us. I stopped first. You've been doing this a lot, I said. Waiting. Yes. A pause. I wanted to talk. You had opportunities. I know, he said, and that actually sounded like the first honest thing he'd said in a while. I just didn't know what to say before. I studied him. He looked different. Not confident. Not smug. Just unsettled. Like the version of me he remembered didn't match the one standing in front of him anymore. That's not my issue, I said finally. I know, he replied quickly. Then hesitated. He stopped. Frowned slightly, like the sentence didn't exist in a form he could use. I don't like how things ended. I almost laughed. That's funny. I don't remember you being interested in how things started. That shut him down again. But this time, he didn't look away. He stayed focused on me. I thought you'd always be there, he admitted. The words landed heavier than the others. Just honest. I nodded once. Yeah, I said. So did I. Silence stretched. Just two people standing in the space between what used to be and what wasn't anymore. Then I stepped past him. This time, he didn't follow. But because, finally, he understood it wouldn't change anything. And I kept walking anyway. Ethan didn't follow me after that. Not this time. And after a while, even the waiting stopped feeling important. Months passed. Then a year. Then another. School became something I moved through instead of something that defined me. Exams came and went. So did seating charts, rumors, and the noise that used to feel so loud. Ethan still existed in it somewhere. Basketball highlights, occasional mentions, a name people still recognized, but he wasn't part of my orbit anymore. Not really. Ashton, on the other hand, stayed consistent. Just study messages, occasional notes, and the kind of presence that didn't demand anything back. We studied. We argued about answers. We talked about small things that didn't feel small at the time. And slowly, life stopped feeling like something I was recovering from. 3 years later, I stood in front of the university notice board, staring at my name under an acceptance list I used to think belonged to someone else. Northwood University, someone behind me said. I turned slightly. Ashton stood there too. Still annoyingly calm. Still like he already knew this would happen. You made it, he said. I exhaled. I told you I would. You said you'd try. I always underpromise. He smirked. Still lying then. I rolled my eyes. But I was smiling. That was new too. Later that day, I saw Ethan again. Just briefly,